Hey family. So for those who don't know me, my name's Anne Marie Sorrell. I am 40 years old. I live in West Palm Beach, Florida. And I am an author, wrote a book, Chronicles of a Serial Dater, a couple years back. And business owner, entrepreneur, community advocate, and so much more. And I wanted to document my fertility journey and share with you this experience that I am embarking on. So far, it has been pretty emotional, but I'm so hopeful right now, more so than I was 5 months ago. So, to share a little background story, last year when I turned 39, and as I was just kind of evaluating my life and trying to figure out what direction I want to go in, it's like I'm turning 40. My biological clock had been ticking for years, and I'm single, not married, never married, and had decided to just kind of be a little more intentional. And so that was my intention last year, was to be intentional with my dating life and meeting what would hopefully be Mr. Right. And so after a few months of dating, that didn't really happen. So I decided to take a hiatus, and then I met a gentleman Memorial Day weekend, and we hit it off. And things moved really fast and seemed like a match made in heaven. And from there, I expressed very clearly what I was looking for and what I wanted and what my plans were, and he seems to be okay with it. And so there I started planning, like, okay, let me finally see if I can actually even conceive a child, because I had never tried and had never been pregnant. So in my first going to see what was going on with me, well, before that even happened, I had an issue where I had irregular periods, where just out of the blue, I'd have a period that would last 2, 3 weeks, a month, and nonstop, to the point where I was anemic. And so that happened twice. And after the second time, it's found that I had a polyp that was causing a bleeding on my uterine lining. So decided to have it removed. And in that process, was discussing with my OBGYN the possibility of, after removing the polyp, of then going into planning for a pregnancy, planning for a baby. And I was so excited. And then literally a week before I was going in to have the polyp removed, the gentleman and I broke up. And I won't go into details about that. And the week after my procedure, when I had the polyp removed, I went back into the room waiting on my OBGYN. And as I stared across from me on the wall, looking at the poster that they have in every OBGYN office with the woman and the fetus growing in her stomach, I just got super emotional, because at that point I felt that I had finally met someone who understood me, who I thought that, that was going to be it. And at that moment when my physician walked in, I just lost it. And she asked me what was wrong, and I said, I don't think there's going to be a baby, because I have no one to plan to have the baby with. So I was very emotional and traumatized. Fast forward to months and months later. That was in September of last year, 2019. And January came. I said, okay, I'm going to pick myself back up, and we're going to figure this thing out with or without someone. And I decided to continue with figuring out what was going to happen with my body and if I could conceive. So I went in for another procedure, and I don't have the exact name of it, but it's where they put fluids. They run fluids up through your uterus and into your fallopian tubes to see if there's any blockage. And so I had that appointment scheduled for January, 2 weeks before my 40th birthday. And single. Was still in conversation with the gentleman, but had started dating again to see, what other options were out there. Because he and I was not planning on getting back together. So went in for that procedure 2 weeks before my birthday, and all I remember is going into the exam room, and they started the procedure. And initially, when they tried to put the fluid in, something went wrong. They couldn't get it in. They said my uterus was tilted, so they were having some challenges. And then when they finally was able to get everything situated, I'm laying on the exam table, and I hear them, the doctor and the nurse, talking, and they're like, okay, nothing's going through. So this was one of my fallopian tubes, and nothing was going through. The fluid was not going through. So they said, well, let's try the other one. And they tried the other one. And by this time, I'm nervous. I'm emotional. Felt like my world was slowly crashing. And as they talked about the other one, the other tube being blocked and the fluids not going through that one, I felt like a part of me had literally died. And so when I pulled myself up off the exam table and had to go sit with the physician in his office, I just lost it. I couldn't stop crying. And his only answer for me at the time was, you can always try IVF if you and your partner are trying. That is an option. And I asked about, well, what could cause the blockage? He said it could be a number of things. He had asked me if I had ever had STD, and I said no. If I had ever, if I had endometriosis or anything like that, no. Never had any of those diagnoses. So I was devastated because he had no answers for me, and I didn't know what to do. And here it was, he was telling me about IVF, and I'm like, I don't even have a partner to do IVF with or to go through this whole process. And so I left the office and I went to the car, and I just cried for 2 hours in the parking lot in my car. And I called my mom, and I remember telling her, like, I'm not going to have a grandbaby for you. And she asked me what happened. And I explained to her, and she said, well, it's okay. We'll figure it out. It's going to be okay. We'll figure it out. And she wanted me to go home or come over, but I had to go to Miami for a meeting, so I couldn't. I just had to pull myself together and try to make it through the rest of the workday. And the days that followed were just so emotional, and I felt that another rug had been snatched under me. Something had been taken away. And I know that I was coming up to my 40th birthday, single. Yes, successful and accomplished, but single, no children. And here it was, I was being told that my only option was IVF. So I did speak to the gentleman from before, and I told him what happened, and he told me to get a second opinion and to not worry about it. It'll work out. So for the past few months, that was late January of 2020. It is now July 15th. And I started to read. I had purchased a book, Sacred Woman, back in October of last year, not because of any particular reason, just someone was reading it, my cousin. And I said, oh, that looks interesting. And I ordered it on Amazon, and it just sat there for months. I never turned a page, never opened it, didn't know what it was about. And so when I finally decided to open the book, because I figured, oh, it's about self-care, it was actually about womb care. And I said, well, this is interesting. And this was right after, right before my birthday, a few days before. And I said, well, this is interesting. Let me take a look at it. And I started doing research and thinking, okay, there's got to be a different way. And I finally opened up to my family about 2 months ago, my sisters and brothers. And they've recommended different herbs, and we're Caribbean, so there's a bush and a tea for everything. But of course, I'm not in Jamaica, so it's not easily accessible. But what that did was it opened my mind to start thinking of what are my alternatives. And so I went back to my physician, and this time I went back to the one who I intended to see initially. And she said, we're going to try everything. We're going to try natural. We're going to run different blood work. We're going to figure it out. And if all fails, there are other ways to be a mother. There's adoption. There's being a mentor. There's foster care. There's all types. And so I had to come to a place of peace to say, okay, let's look at all the options. Let's look at natural alternative medicine. Let's look at self-healing, because I've never, ever really truly taken the time to heal myself or to look withinward or to align or realign myself. All I've been doing is working and being a career woman and being accomplished, but not taking time for myself and taking care of myself and watching my stress. And so as we start running tests in March, there are some other discoveries that my blood levels were low again, so it's very anemic. My vitamin D levels were super low. I was I hopefully was in the pre-diabetic phase, like literally borderline diabetic, where it's like right there at the percentile that crosses over into diabetes. And also my blood pressure was elevated for weeks and weeks, months and months. And so I started feeling those effects on my whole entire body, just my joints, my breathing, started feeling dizzy, just everything. And so my gynecologist also concluded, along with my primary care physician, that at this time, even trying to conceive a child would be very risky until I get that part of my body under control. And I knew for sure I didn't want to go on any type of blood pressure medicine or diabetes medicine or anything like that. So I told my physician and said to myself that give me 3 to 4 months. Let me fix it. Let me lose weight. Let me change my diet. Let me exercise. Let me work on reducing my stress levels. And so since March, in the wake of COVID-19, which is the silver lining is that I have been able to stop and actually take time to readjust myself. And it hasn't been easy. It's been an emotional roller coaster with everything happening with the pandemic and protests and being quarantined and away from family and friends. And trying to date during quarantine is like stressful. So where am I now in July? Well, I went back to my OBGYN, had another checkup, an ultrasound last month. So, although I got rid of one polyp last September, I now have two polyps on my uterine lining. So, there's an imbalance in my hormone that's causing these polyps to grow, which means that any intrusion on my uterine lining would prevent me from even having in vitro, because it needs to be clear for an embryo to develop. So at some point I will have to remove those, but it's not immediate right now. So the focus is on diet, exercise. I have managed to lose about 12 to 15 pounds since March. My blood pressure is stabilizing to its normal. It does get elevated every so often, every few days or so, but for the most part, in general, it's been pretty steady. And I don't know what my glucose levels are just yet, because I have to go back and do some blood work later this week, which will check all of my levels. And so I'm hoping for good news, because I have been building my immune system. I've been exercising at minimum 3 days a week, most days 4 to 5, most weeks 4 to 5 days. I've cut back on salt, cut back on carbs and sugar. Still do eat a little bit here and there. I'm not perfect, but I'm working on it. And I sleep a little bit more than I did before. I still work a lot, so I'm working on that and reducing my stress levels there with work. I'm dating, so there's some level of companionship, often from a distance. So that can be a little hard, and it's nothing serious, so I don't know where that's going to go as it relates to potential father of my child, but only God knows. And I am reading, I'm researching. One of the books that I'm actually reading right now is this one, which is The Fertility Cure, and it's the ancient Chinese wellness program for getting pregnant and having healthy babies. So I'm also reading this book, which is the one that I had originally purchased, Sacred Woman, by Queen Afua. And I have a few other books that are looking at hormones and herbs and supplements and vitamins and alkaline diets, plant-based diets. The common theme with all of this in preparing my body is plant-based. No meat, no dairy, no sugars, refined sugars, very little salt, specific fruits and vegetables, those that are more alkaline based and less acidic, certain nuts, certain grains, limited amount of soy, so certain beans. It's a common theme in all these books and all of the research I've been doing, certain teas. And as I go through this journey, I will share with you more. Meditation, which is something that I don't know how to do, so that's going to be new for me, and learning that. Yoga, that's pretty new for me, and as I'm learning that as well. So this is a whole transformation. Acupuncture, which I never ever tried. So a whole transformation for me. A whole different level of self-care that I've just never ever embarked on. Aligning and centering myself. So there's a lot to learn. A lot of reading. A lot of research. I still have more weight to lose. My goal is to lose another 25 to 30 pounds. I just want to get out of the pre-diabetic zone completely and level out my blood pressure completely. So how am I doing that? I just started this week. Exercise twice a day, at least 30 to 45 minutes in the morning and 30 to 45 minutes in the evening. Continue to eat more fruits and vegetables, doing research on fruits and vegetables, and reading. So this is where I am today, and I just wanted to share this update as I video journal this journey. I know it won't be easy. It's going to take a lot of patience and faith, but I want to try this the most natural way possible as I pray that God will help my body heal, to bear fruit, the most precious fruit one could ever bear, which is life, and to bless me with the person who will embark on this journey with me, who will be committed to me, the journey, and our future child. And if for whatever reason there is not a person, I am still open to a more modern way of, I think it's called IUI as a method. So that's one option of getting sperm donated, or going to a donor bank and doing the IUI method. And if all fails, then I have come to peace or come to terms with God's decision and of what my life should be and how I can play the role of a mother, which I have, thankfully, been a mother to my niece, who's now an adult. But if I, for whatever reason, God forbid, cannot naturally become a mother, then I am open to other alternatives, such as adoption. But for now, for the next several months through this journey, we're going to focus on the natural process and have faith and pray that it is God's will and it will be done. And so I ask for your prayers, your encouragement, your upliftments through this process, through this journey to motherhood. Operation Pride and Joy 2021, because we're already in July, so the rest of 2020 is definitely to make it happen. So thank you, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you for joining me on this journey.